Across this series of conversations, I asked everyone I was talking to start by telling me a story about their journey as a learner and what that had taught them about learning. These stories included inspiring tales about how teachers and peers had changed people's perceptions of their own capacity to learn and their own trajectory in life. They also included heartbreaking stories about how an interaction with an educator challenged and undercut a sense of self-worth and sense of capacity to learn. Across the conversations, I came to see that the actions and words of educators convey such a sense of expectation, and that sense of expectation becomes very powerful in shaping how children live into it and how children ultimately see their own self-worth and their own potential. Here are some of what we heard.
Students are not just students, but they're whole human beings. So they come into classrooms, schools and classrooms, with a variety of life experiences. We make some judgments about those life experiences. And as a consequence, we don't hold kids to these so-called standards. So we do what I call give them permission to fail. Oh, don't worry about that. You know, maybe tomorrow you'll feel more like working. Oh, I understand things are tough for you. Whereas we would never do that with the kids for whom we have the highest expectations. For them, we do what I call, we demand success. We demand it. You must do it. Now, doesn't mean we're harsh with it. What we may do with that is they turn in something we don't think it's quality, and we say to them, I'm going to give you another chance to work on this, because here's what's wrong with it. As opposed to for those kids for whom we permit to fail, they turn in something, it's low quality, and we say, well, you know, this is probably the best you can do.
How are we defining what high expectations looks like? I think in the past we've used models that kind of espoused high expectations but didn't necessarily enact them. So, you know, people using cheers or chants or putting, you know, college things on the wall, those are all important. But if in our day-to-day actions we're putting work in front of students that doesn't express high expectations, or day-to-day interactions with students or their families, we're not being honest with them about where they are in terms of their achievement or proficiency, then that really erodes the honesty of our high expectations that we might be holding.
In fourth grade, my parents really excitingly moved us out of the city of Detroit, Michigan, into one of the great suburban school districts, one of the best at the time in Oakland County. And my family was so excited about this opportunity because they really saw education as an equalizer. They didn't graduate from college, but they knew that if they got us into good schools, my sister and I, they believed that we would be able to get to college and graduate from college, and that would make our life better than theirs. And when I got to this fourth grade school, I was so excited, but I quickly realized that, one, I was ill-prepared to actually catch up on learning at fourth grade by that time, and that my teachers saw me as an ill-prepared student, as someone that was coming from the outside. And all these, you know, at the time I couldn't understand it, all these assumptions when I look back. I remember wanting to do student council, and they were telling me, you know, you're not smart enough, essentially. Your grades aren't enough for you to even take on any outside curricular activities.
I think I'll talk about my daughter, Eden. She is now in 6th grade, and so much fun. But I'll go back to a moment in time when she was in elementary school. I think this was something like 2nd grade that she was in. And we were having a parent-teacher conference with her teacher, and she wasn't doing that well in math. She was misunderstanding some of the concepts. She was falling a little bit behind, and it wasn't egregious, but it wasn't exactly where I think she and the teacher and everyone would want her to be. And in the context of the parent-teacher conference, the teacher said something to the effect of, you know, she's just not a math kind of person. Like, math isn't her thing. And of course, for my wife and I, as the parent of a girl, we were thinking to ourselves, she's only in second grade and we're already identifying that she's not a math kind of person. And thinking about all of the, all the things that we know about stereotype threat and expectations for girls in math and science. And we basically said, we're not going to make that determination at this point in time.
A lot of what makes students successful in college is their connection to the experience, them being able to see themselves as completers. And when you erode their sense of self as a college student, just like anything else, and you know this with high school dropouts, right? Like typically in the 5th or so grade, students begin to toy with the notion of, am I a learner, right? And especially for African-American boys in particular, that the data has borne that out. And then in middle school, they'll begin to have further erosion around themselves as a learner, especially if all of the external stimuli tell them something different. By high school, we'll see a dropout, right? It's the same thing in college.
But the other common thing that these boys had that I shared with them as well is that sometime in 3rd or 4th grade, they realized they were smart at math when they thought they knew their multiplication tables before all the other kids did. So that is so interesting in the sense that
what is it about those multiplication facts, Dr. Barry? I mean, they're so emotional.
They are, and I think as a field, we give those facts high status for some reason. They serve as a filter to determine whether kids can or cannot do mathematics, when we know that is not necessarily true. And that whole idea, and I'm not implying that we don't want kids to know fluency, not know their facts. What I am implying is the kind of the timed automaticity that was my experience and others. Although I was successful at it, and these boys were successful at it, it gave them kind of this entry point. But what about the other kids who were not successful at it, but could have just done the math and could have performed really well?
Been lucky enough to have the mother I did, who happens to be an immigrant herself, and so had sat in the shoes of the students that she was teaching. The version of the narrative that I heard really early on was not one of sort of those kids aren't as smart or as motivated or don't have the same love of school, or those kids are behind others, which really I think betrays this deficit mindset that we see a lot still, unfortunately, in our public school systems. And instead, sort of here's how we can really come together as a community to wrap supports around these really capable, talented kids who have overcome incredible odds. To even fit in these classrooms today, and whose parents, put their own lives at risk to give their students, their kids, a better opportunity. Lots of which were, educationally motivated. They wanted their kids to have a better education by coming to the U.S. And so, her perspective was always like, look at these amazing kids and watch what they can do if we support them.
And you don't change belief systems just by telling people have high expectations. Teachers are people too. We've been influenced by our own backgrounds and experiences. And if we've never seen excellence among certain groups of kids, it's really hard to tell us, oh, you got to believe this kid can be excellent. So there's a fair amount of unlearning that teachers have to do about who is capable.
Yeah, so I do think that there is this consistent drumbeat about belief in students and clarity around expectations. And we think about those things in two separate bullets. Like, we need to know what is it that the standards expect? Is it clear? Do we know what it looks like in practice? Do we have resources to support it? And we can do all of those things. And if underlying there is a conscious, or more likely unconscious, disbelief that students can, I don't know that the greatest set of resources are going to get us where we need to go.
So I had opportunities to teach in predominantly African-American, Latino, underserved communities, and I had opportunity to teach in very high socioeconomic differences were amazing, beyond the resources, like what people believe the students could do. So that's what informs me every day. That is why our true north is always planted in instruction and equity with a big E.
Mm-hmm.
Naming and saying that institutionalized and systemic racism is pervasive, it is intertwined, it is part of our current DNA in education, just like it is in all of our other systems. And not acknowledging that and not examining how it plays its role, well, it sort of debunks the reason why we're even trying to move students along through the education system.
Expectations was kind of the leading piece where, especially for students who were the furthest behind, had the biggest impact on their growth within a year. It is almost the rule as opposed to the exception that you're going to have students with unfinished learning. It's the rule and not the exception that you're going to have students who are multilingual learners. It's the rule, not the exception, that you're going to have students who you're going to need to be cognizant of any biases related to socioeconomic status. And so I think there is so much unpacking of that needed to happen that is playing into the expectations that teachers have, both about their students' ability to do the work and their own ability to make that growth happen for kids.
In the early part of the 20th century, we believed that genes were the drivers of who we become, including our intelligence. Today, we know that intelligence is malleable, okay, and that our environments and experiences are the determinants of who we become. We believed that talent was scarce, that it was distributed as a bell curve, with most people falling into the middle, with a few talented people in the tails that we have to go and find. And once we go and find them, we can put them on a pathway so that they get to the good colleges and the good jobs. Talent is not scarce. Talent is actually plentiful. It's not standardized, and it doesn't exist in society as a bell curve. And finally, the fifth, we believe that the potential of a child was knowable in advance. And today we know that you can't see the potential of a child unless you put that child in a context that was designed to reveal who they are.
Across this theme, I had 3 big takeaways. 1, potential is not fixed or knowable in advance. What we are asked to do changes what we are capable of doing. 2, students take cues about their potential as learners from their interactions with their teachers, from teachers' actions and words. Even when it is not intentional, lowered expectations are internalized by students as indications of their value and potential to learn. 3, we all carry assumptions or biases about dissimilar groups, but these assumptions do not have to govern our interactions. In order to see and change the way bias plays out in our actions, we must create brave spaces to reflect on and talk about the factors that shape our expectations. Thanks for watching. Next up, theme 3. Students engage and learn best from work that is challenging, relevant to their lives, and helps them understand and impact the world.